When Corporal Joran Velt stepped off the dust-choked transport onto the cracked ferrocrete of Outpost Theta 9, the sky above was already bruised purple with the double sunset of the planet Varelles. The air tasted like burnt copper and dry spice, and the wind carried whispers of old battles through the rusted husks of downed warships that dotted the horizon like tombstones. He'd expected gunfire, drills, maybe a patrol through hostile sandstorms, but not this. Not an assignment so bizarre it made his stomach drop faster than a gravity bomb. Standing in the command briefing tent, flanked by weary human officers and towering alien officers with eyes like polished obsidian, Joran was handed a sealed data slate with his first duty noted in crisp, blinking script. Private liaison duty with General Sylvie Areneth. Daily. Minimum 2 hours. Begin immediately. Joran blinked. Private liaison? He asked, voice cracking slightly. The human commander, a grizzled veteran with a cybernetic eye that glowed faintly red, clapped him on the shoulder. You're the only one who speaks fluent Varethian without sounding like you're gargling rocks, he said, deadpan. And she won't talk to anyone else. Not since the Battle of the Crimson Dunes. Just go. Smile. Don't touch anything purple unless invited. General Sylvie Areneth was waiting for him in the eastern spire of the outpost. A slender, angular structure carved from black stone that hummed with residual energy. She stood by a panoramic window, back turned, her white hair cascading like moonlight over the gleaming plates of her golden armor. Her skin was the deep violet of twilight clouds before a storm, and even from behind, Joran could sense the coiled intensity in her posture. She didn't turn when he entered, but the door sealed shut behind him with a soft hiss, and the air grew thick with something unspoken. You're late by 3.7 seconds, she said, her voice low and melodic, yet edged with steel. Human inefficiency? Or did you stop to admire the wreckage again? I was verifying protocol, Joran stammered, instinctively standing at attention. I wasn't told what liaison duty entailed. Sylvie turned then, and Joran nearly forgot how to breathe. Her eyes were silver, luminous, framed by faint bioluminescent markings that pulsed gently with her emotions. She studied him like he was a puzzle she hadn't yet decided to solve. Protocol. She gave a dry laugh that sounded like wind chimes in a graveyard. There is no protocol. There hasn't been since the Accord collapsed and your people dropped fire from orbit on our nursery sanctuaries. But here we are. 2 species who once butchered each other now sharing rations and airspace. And you're my babysitter. Joran's face flushed. I wasn't involved in the orbital strikes, General. I was stationed on Luna. Of course you weren't, she said, stepping closer. You're barely old enough to shave without cutting yourself. She circled him slowly, her armored boots silent on the floor. Yet they sent you. Why? Because I speak your language, he said, more confidently this time. And maybe, because I don't hate you. Sylvie stopped. For a long moment, she just stared at him, her expression unreadable. Then, unexpectedly, she gestured toward a low table where 2 steaming mugs Saturday sit. She ordered. Drink. This Kethra root tea. Won't kill you. Probably. Over the next few days, Joran returned to the spire every afternoon. At first, their meetings were stiff, filled with awkward silences and clipped exchanges. Sylvie would quiz him on Earth customs, why humans buried their dead instead of returning them to the sky winds, why they celebrated anniversaries of battles instead of mourning them. Joran, in turn, asked about Varethian traditions, how they wove star charts into wedding veils, how their children were taught to sing to dormant volcanoes to calm their rage. Slowly, the ice between them began to thaw. One afternoon, as sandstorms raged outside and the outpost lights flickered, Sylvie removed her armor for the first time in front of him. Beneath it, her body bore the scars of a dozen campaigns, jagged lines across her ribs, a deep burn along her shoulder that matched the insignia of the human 7th Fleet. Joran didn't flinch. Instead, he told her about the scar on his own leg, from a training accident with a faulty hoverbike at 16. She listened, then to his astonishment, laughed. It was a real laugh, warm and unguarded, and it filled the room like sunlight breaking through ash. You're strange, Joran Velt, she said, wrapping her fingers around her mug. You ask questions like you genuinely want answers, not like you're gathering intelligence or trying to impress. I just want to understand, he said simply. If we're going to share this outpost, this planet, we should know each other, not just as soldier and general, but as people. Sylvie looked away, her white hair catching the dim light. My people believe understanding is the first step toward betrayal, she murmured. To know someone is to find their weakness. Or their strength, Joran countered gently. She didn't answer, but that night, she invited him to stay past his 2 hours. They watched the twin moons rise over the dunes, their conversation drifting from war to poetry, from strategy to the strange earth dish called pizza that Joran tried and failed to describe accurately. By the end of the week, Sylvie began meeting him at the door, armor already half removed, a small smile playing on her lips. But peace on Varelli's was fragile. On the 12th day, alarms blared through the outpost. Red lights pulsed in the corridors. Joran sprinted to the command center to find chaos. Screens flashing with enemy signatures, voices shouting in 3 languages. A splinter faction of Varethian warlords, furious that their queen had signed a ceasefire with humanity, had launched a surprise assault on the western perimeter. Explosions lit up the desert, shaking the ground beneath their feet. Sylvie was already suited up, her expression grim. They're targeting the spire, she said, strapping on her plasma gauntlet. They think I've gone soft, that I've betrayed our blood for human whispers. Joran grabbed his rifle. Then let's show them you haven't. She looked at him, surprised. You don't have to fight with me. I'm your liaison, he said, checking his ammo. That means I stick with you, even into hell. What followed was a blur of fire and steel. Together, they raced through the crumbling corridors, defending choke points, coordinating human and Varethian squads through a shared comms channel Joran jury-rigged on the fly. Sylvie fought like a storm given form, graceful, devastating, her golden armor flashing in the muzzle fire. Joran covered her back, his earthborn instincts syncing with her alien rhythm. At one point, a warlord leapt from the shadows, blade aimed at Sylvie's throat, but Joran tackled him, taking a gash across his arm that burned like acid. Sylvie finished the attacker with a single, precise strike to the heart, then turned and pressed a glowing salve to Joran's wound without a word. Later, holed up in a supply bunker as artillery thundered overhead, Sylvie finally spoke. Why did you do that? She asked, her voice raw. You could have stayed behind. Safe. Because you're not just my assignment, he said, wincing as he flexed his bandaged arm. You're my friend. The word hung in the air like a prayer. Sylvie's silver eyes shimmered. We don't have friends in my culture, she said softly. Only allies or mates. Joran's heart hammered. And which am I? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she reached out and touched the side of his face, her fingers cool, her touch electric. You are unprecedented, she whispered. The siege lasted 3 days. By the end, the warlords were routed, their leaders captured or dead. The outpost stood, scarred but unbroken. In the quiet that followed, Sylvie summoned Joran once more, not to the spire, but to the central chamber of the Varethian command wing, where the walls glowed with ancient glyphs and the air smelled of ozone and incense. There, before a gathering of her highest commanders and human liaisons, Sylvie made an announcement that stunned them all. By the blood oath of the twin moons, she declared, her voice ringing with authority, I, General Sylvie Araneth of the 7th Star Legion, name Corporal Joran Velt as my Kethvan, my bonded companion. Not by conquest but by choice. Not by duty, but by heart. Gasps echoed through the chamber. One of her lieutenants stepped forward, eyes blazing. General, this is unheard of. A human? Our laws were written for a time of war. Sylvie interrupted, turning to face them all. This is a time of something new, and if any of you doubt my judgment, challenge me in the ring of embers. I'll bleed for my choice if I must. No one moved. Joran stood frozen, his mind reeling. Bonded companion? Was that a marriage? Alliance? Something else entirely? But when Sylvie turned to him, her expression softer than he'd ever seen it. He knew he didn't need to understand every word. He only needed to understand her. That evening, as they walked the perimeter together. No armor, no rifles, just 2 figures silhouetted against the violet dusk. Sylvie finally explained. Kethvan means shared sky, she said. It means we face the storms together, that our fates are woven into one thread. She paused, then added quietly, and yes, it is what your people would call marriage, though among my kind, it is rarer than peace. Joran stopped walking. But, your people? The court? They'll never accept a human. They already are, she said, a hint of pride in her voice. You fought beside us. You bled for us, and you never once asked for glory. She looked up at the stars emerging above them. Besides, I told them the truth, that I am lonely, that for centuries, I carried the weight of command alone, and that you make the silence bearable. Joran reached for her hand. She let him take it, her fingers interlacing with his despite the cultural taboos, the biological differences, the galaxy of mistrust between their species. I don't know much about Varethian marriage, he admitted, but I know I want to learn. With you. Sylvie smiled, really smiled, and for the first time, the bioluminescent markings on her face glowed a gentle blue, the color of trust, of hope. Then you'll stay? As long as you'll have me, he said. But their moment of peace was short-lived. A week later, a coded transmission arrived from deep space, one that lit up Sylvie's personal console with urgent red glyphs. Her face paled as she read it, her usual composure shattering. It's the High Matriarch, she said, her voice tight. She's summoning me to the Celestial Court on Varelli's Prime. Immediately. Why? Joran asked, alarm rising in his chest. Because, Sylvie said, turning to him with eyes full of dread and determination. Word of our bond has reached the throne, and the matriarch does not approve. She believes I've dishonored our bloodline. She took a deep breath. If I refuse the summons, I'll be declared rogue, my title stripped, my people disowned. And if you go? Joran asked. I may not return, she admitted. The court has methods. But if I don't go, the fragile peace we've built here dies with my defiance. She looked at him, her silver eyes searching his. Come with me. Joran didn't hesitate. Of course. You don't understand, she said, gripping his arms. It's not a request. The matriarch forbids humans from setting foot in the court. If they catch you, they'll execute you as a spy. Or worse. They'll dissect you to learn how you corrupted me. Then we'll be careful, Joran said, smiling faintly. After all, I'm your liaison. Where you go, I go. Sylvie stared at him for a long moment, then pulled him into a fierce embrace. Stubborn human, she whispered, but there was warmth in her voice. Preparations began in secret. They secured a cloaked skiff from a black market trader on the edge of the outpost, stocked it with rations, weapons, and a data core containing all the linguistic and cultural notes Joran had compiled. On the night of their departure, the outpost slept beneath a sky streaked with auroras. As they lifted off, Joran looked back at the place where his life had changed, where he'd gone from a lonely corporal to the chosen mate of a legendary alien general. The journey to Varelli's Prime took 6 days through treacherous nebulae and pirate-infested sectors. Sylvie taught him the old Varethian hymns to pass the time, her voice weaving through the cockpit like starlight. Joran, in turn, told her stories of Earth, of oceans and forests, of cities that touched the clouds, of holidays where people gave each other gifts just to say, I care. She listened with rapt attention, her markings pulsing with curiosity and wonder. When they finally emerged from warp near the capital world, the sight stole Joran's breath. Varelli's Prime hung in the void like a jewel, its surface a swirling tapestry of violet continents and silver oceans, ringed by orbital palaces that shimmered like frozen lightning. At its heart rose the celestial spire, a structure so tall it pierced the planet's upper atmosphere, glowing with the bioluminescent energy of 1,000 generations. We land in the lower docks, Sylvie said, her hands tight on the controls. Disguise yourself as a mute laborer. Speak only if absolutely necessary. And if anyone asks, you're my prisoner. I thought I was your mate, Joran teased, though his nerves were frayed. Sylvie shot him a look that was half exasperation, half affection. In the eyes of the court, you're a disease. In my eyes, you're my sky. She landed the skiff with practiced grace in a shadowed bay, far from prying eyes. For 2 days, they moved through the underbelly of the capital, through markets where alien spices hung thick in the air, through alleyways where dissident poets recited forbidden verses, through hidden sanctuaries where those who defied tradition found refuge. Joran kept his head down, his face covered, his silence convincing. But on the 3rd night, as they neared the base of the celestial spire, they were ambushed. 6 royal enforcers, clad in obsidian armor etched with crimson runes, surrounded them in a dead-end plaza. Their leader, a towering Varethian with cybernetic eyes and a voice like grinding stone, stepped forward. General Areneth, he intoned, you are under arrest for consorting with off-world vermin and violating the blood purity edicts. Sylvie stepped in front of Joran, her golden armor hidden beneath a plain cloak, but her posture radiating defiance. "I answer only to the matriarch," she said coldly. "The matriarch already knows," the enforcer replied, "and she has ordered your human pet exterminated on sight." Before anyone could move, Joran acted. Years of training kicked in. He yanked a smoke grenade from his belt and hurled it at the ground. As thick violet smoke billowed, he grabbed Sylvie's hand and bolted down a side passage, their pursuers shouting behind them. They ran through winding corridors, up stairwells that spiraled into darkness, until they reached a forgotten observation deck high above the city. Panting, Sylvie turned to him, her eyes wide with fear and admiration. "You didn't have to do that," she gasped. "I told you," Joran said, grinning despite everything. "Shared sky, right?" She kissed him then, sudden, fierce, and full of unspoken promises. When she pulled away, her markings glowed gold, the rarest color, the hue of devotion, of irreversible choice. "We're not going to the court," she said, decision hardening in her voice. "Not as prisoners, not as supplicants. We go as equals or we don't go at all." Joran nodded. "Then let's make an entrance they'll never forget." Together they devised a plan. Using Joran's knowledge of human infiltration tactics and Sylvie's understanding of Varethian security systems, they hacked into the Spire's ceremonial broadcast network. On the day of the trial, as the High Matriarch sat upon her throne of living crystal and the court gathered in judgment, the great screens that usually displayed star charts and battle reports instead showed Joran and Sylvie standing side by side on the observation deck, the twin sons of Varelles rising behind them. "I am General Sylvie Areneth." Her voice echoed through every hall, every chamber, every home on the planet. "And this is Joran Velt, my Kethvon, my chosen, my heart. You may call him human. I call him home." The broadcast ended with them clasping hands, their different skins glowing under the dawn light, their faces set with quiet courage. Chaos erupted in the court. Some called for violence. Others fell silent, moved by what they'd seen. And deep in the throne room, the ancient matriarch, her skin the color of dried blood, her hair long and white as snow, watched the recording 3 times. Then, to the shock of her advisors, she stood, raised her hand, and spoke a single word in the old tongue. "Vethkari, witness." The trial would proceed. But now it would be witnessed by all. As guards approached their hiding place, not with weapons drawn but with ceremonial staves, Joran squeezed Sylvie's hand. "Whatever happens," he said, "we face it together." She nodded, her silver eyes shining with a mixture of fear and fierce hope. "Together," she agreed, and as they stepped out to meet their fate, the first true alliance between human and Varethian began. Not in blood, but in courage. Not in conquest, but in love. The road ahead would be long, fraught with danger and doubt, but for the first time in centuries, the sky above Varelles Prime looked not like a battlefield, but like a beginning. The guards did not bind them. They did not drag them in chains through the echoing corridors of the spire as Sylvie had feared. Instead, they formed a silent honor guard, staves held not as weapons but as ceremonial poles, their polished surfaces reflecting the amber light that poured through the upper arches of the celestial spire. The crowd parted as Joran and Sylvie walked, Varethians of every rank and caste watching with eyes wide with disbelief, curiosity, or quiet admiration. Whispers rippled through the throng like waves across a silver sea. The human walks unshackled. The general holds his hand. The matriarch called for witness. At the heart of the spire, in the chamber of echoing truths, the high matriarch waited upon her throne. Unlike the ornate, towering seats of human monarchs, hers was low and simple. A single slab of living crystal grown from the planet's core, its surface shimmering with slow pulses of inner light. Her skin, ancient and deeply lined, held the color of dried blood, and her white hair, untouched by dye or ornament, flowed past her waist like a river of frost. She was flanked not by warriors, but by elders. 12 of them, robed in deep indigo, their eyes closed in meditation. Sylvie knelt. Joran, uncertain, hesitated, then followed her lead, lowering himself onto one knee, head bowed not in submission, but in respect. The matriarch did not speak immediately. She studied them, her gaze lingering on Joran longer than Sylvie expected. When she finally spoke, her voice was thin but resonant, like wind through ancient trees. "You broadcast rebellion into the heart of our sanctum," she said. "You defied the edicts. You brought an outsider into sacred space. And yet, you did not flee when you could have. Why? Sylvie lifted her head. Because fear has ruled our people long enough, she said, her voice steady. We built walls to keep the galaxy out, but all we did was trap ourselves in silence. Joran didn't come to conquer us. He came to understand us. And in doing so, he showed me that strength isn't only in the blade. It's in the hand that reaches out, even when it trembles. A murmur passed through the elders. One opened his eyes, a rare breach of protocol, and looked directly at Joran. And you, human, the matriarch said, turning her full attention to him. What do you seek here? Power? Secrets? Or merely the thrill of mating with an alien queen? Joran met her gaze without flinching. I seek nothing but the right to stand beside her, he said simply. I don't want your throne, your tech, or your secrets. I just want to be with her, even if it means living in exile, even if it means dying here today. Silence fell thick and heavy. Then, to everyone's astonishment, the matriarch laughed. A dry, crackling sound that seemed to shake dust from the ceiling. He speaks like a fool, she said, but his heart beats without deceit. She leaned forward, her ancient eyes piercing. Tell me, human, can your kind bear our children? Joran blinked. I don't know. Biologically, maybe not in the usual way. But if you're asking whether I'd raise a child with her, teach it Earth songs and Varithian star chants, show it how to heal as well as how to fight, then yes, with everything I am. Sylvie's breath caught. Among her people, the question of progeny was never asked lightly. It was the deepest test of commitment. For the matriarch to ask it meant she was considering their bond not as a scandal, but as a possibility. The matriarch leaned back, her expression unreadable. There is precedent, she said after a long pause. Long ago, in the first concordance, a human medic saved the life of a Varithian fleet mother during the plague of silent stars. In gratitude, she took him as Kethvon. Their union bore no biological children, but they adopted 3 orphans from both species and raised them in the Valley of Shared Breath. Their descendants still serve as bridgekeepers between our worlds. Sylvie's eyes widened. That story was stricken from the archives after the War of Shattered Skies. And now it returns, the matriarch said, her voice softening. Perhaps the universe is reminding us that some bridges, once burned, can be rebuilt. Not with steel, but with trust. She rose slowly, supported by 2 attendants. You will not be punished, she declared. But you will not be celebrated either, not yet. The bond you claim must be tested. Not by combat, but by care. There is a sanctuary in the glass wastes. A place where wounded warriors from both our peoples are sent to heal, far from politics and pride. You will go there together. For 1 lunar cycle you will serve them. Feed them, tend their wounds, listen to their nightmares. If, at the end, even one of them says your presence brought peace, then your union will be recognized by the court. It was not the acceptance Sylvie had hoped for, but it was a chance. They departed the spire at dawn, given a small transport and supplies, but no escorts, no surveillance. The glass waste stretched before them like a sea of frozen lightning. Vast plains of silica turned molten by ancient orbital strikes, now cooled into endless fields of shimmering, razor-edged glass. In the center of it all stood the sanctuary of mended scars, a low, dome-shaped structure grown from biostone, its walls pulsing faintly with healing energy. The first days were grueling. The wounded were bitter, broken, suspicious. Human soldiers who had lost limbs in Varithian ambushes glared at Sylvie with open hatred. Varithian warriors, their armor fused to scorched skin by human plasma fire, recoiled from Joran's touch. Arguments erupted over rations, over sleeping quarters, over who had suffered more. But Joran and Sylvie worked in quiet tandem. He used his medic training to clean burns and reset bones, speaking gently in both languages. She sang the old healing chants over fevered brows, her white hair glowing faintly as her bioluminescent markings pulsed with calming energy. Slowly, grudgingly, the hostility began to fade. One night, a young Varithian pilot, her left arm gone, her voice hoarse from screaming in her sleep, asked Joran why he helped them. You could have stayed at your outpost, she whispered. Safe. Joran looked at Sylvie, who was mending a tear in a human soldier's blanket nearby. Because healing isn't about who started the fire, he said. It's about who brings the water. The pilot nodded, then reached out with her remaining hand. Sing me the Earth lullaby again, she asked. The one about the moon watching over dreams. He did. By the end of the lunar cycle, something remarkable had happened. The humans and Varethians weren't just coexisting. They were sharing stories, teaching each other games, even laughing together. A former sniper taught a Varethian engineer how to play cards. A Varethian medic showed human medics how to use sonic resonance to ease phantom limb pain. And at the center of it all were Joran and Sylvie, no longer just a human and an alien, but a quiet symbol of what could be. When the court emissary arrived to collect their verdict, all 23 patients stood together and spoke with one voice. They brought peace. Back in the celestial spire, the matriarch listened to the report in silence. Then she turned to Sylvie and Joran, who stood once more before the throne. "You have passed the trial of tenderness," she said. "Rarer than the trial of blood, and far more revealing." She raised her hand, and the elders stood in unison. "By the will of the witnessed path, I recognize the bond of Kethvon between General Sylvie Araneth and Corporal Joran Velt. May your sky be shared, your storms weathered, and your silence never again lonely." The court erupted, not in protest, but in applause. Not thunderous, but steady, growing like a tide. Even the enforcers who had once hunted them now bowed their heads in respect. But as Joran and Sylvie embraced, a new transmission crackled over Sylvie's wristcom. A Priority 1 alert from Outpost Theta 9. The human commander's voice was strained. "Joran, Sylvie, you need to come back. Now." The ceasefire's collapsing. New factions emerged, calling themselves the Purifiers. They've got stolen quantum warheads. They've already hit 2 neutral colonies. And they're broadcasting one message on every channel. The hybrid must die. They mean you. The joy in the chamber turned to ice. Sylvie's face hardened, the warrior returning to her eyes. "They won't stop," she said quietly. "Not while we exist as proof that peace is possible." Joran squeezed her hand. "Then we don't hide. We fight. Not with more war, but with more truth. We show the galaxy what we built, what we're building." The matriarch watched them, then spoke again, her voice carrying the weight of centuries. "The spire will stand with you, not as soldiers but as witnesses. Every broadcast, every ship, every word you speak. Our networks will carry it. Let them try to silence you. They will find they are shouting into a chorus." As they prepared to leave Varelli's prime, not as fugitives but as ambassadors of a new era, Joran looked out at the stars. Not as distant points of light, but as future homes, future bridges. Sylvie stood beside him, her golden armor reforged not for battle, but for ceremony, etched now with both human and Varethian symbols. Their story was far from over. The Purifiers were gathering. War threatened to swallow the fragile peace whole. But for the first time in history, humanity and the Varethian Dominion had something more powerful than weapons or treaties. They had a human who loved an alien general, and an alien general who dared to believe in a human. And sometimes, in a galaxy drowning in blood and fire, that was enough to ignite a new dawn. The journey back to Outpost Theta 9 was swift, the matriarch's fastest skiff slicing through the void like a blade of starlight. Joran and Sylvie didn't speak much during the flight. There was no need. Their hands remained clasped the entire time, a silent vow passing between them with every pulse of Sylvie's softly glowing markings. When the scarred silhouette of the outpost came into view, wreathed in dust and shadow, they saw not ruin, but resolve. Human and Varethian soldiers stood shoulder to shoulder along the perimeter, fortifying trenches not with walls of hate, but with walls of unity. The Purifiers had struck once, detonating a quantum device near the northern relay station, but the blast had been contained, thanks to early warnings from sympathetic scouts who defected from the extremist ranks. The message was clear. The Purifiers didn't just want war. They wanted extinction of any hope for coexistence. And Joran and Sylvie, the living symbol of that hope, were their primary target. But this time they weren't alone. Within days, the Sanctuary of Mended Scars became more than a healing center. It became a beacon. Veterans from both species, inspired by the stories spreading across the galactic net, began arriving in droves. Not to fight, but to stand. They formed the Concord Vanguard, a coalition of former enemies now united under a single banner. A circle divided into violet and blue, with 2 hands clasped at its heart. Joran, against all expectations, was named its human co-commander. Sylvie its Varethian voice, not because they sought power, but because they'd proven that true strength lay not in dominance, but in mutual care. The final confrontation came not on a battlefield, but in the ruins of the old War Council chamber, a hollowed-out asteroid the Purifiers had claimed as their stronghold. They'd broadcast one last ultimatum. Surrender Joran and Sylvie, or watch neutral colonies burn. Instead of surrendering, the Concord Vanguard answered with a transmission of their own. It showed Joran teaching a Varethian child how to plant earth wheat in hydroponic soil. It showed Sylvie braiding a human girl's hair with strands of starlight filament. It showed soldiers from both species sharing meals, patching each other's wounds, laughing under alien skies. And at the end, Joran and Sylvie stood before the camera, not in armor, but in simple robes, one blue, one violet, joined at the wrist by woven cords of their people's sacred fibers. "We are not your enemy," Joran said, his voice calm but firm. "We are your future." Sylvie added, "If you fire your warheads, you won't destroy hope. You'll only prove that you were never worthy of it." The broadcast went viral across every inhabited system. Even the Purifier's own ranks began to fracture. Within hours, their second-in-command, a former schoolteacher turned soldier after losing her family in the war, turned her fleet against the leader, disabling the warheads before they could launch. The Purifier leader, cornered and abandoned, tried to flee, but was captured not by soldiers, but by former allies who refused to let hatred consume them one moment longer. Peace didn't return overnight. Trust had to be rebuilt colony by colony, heart by heart. But something had shifted. The galaxy had seen what was possible when compassion replaced conquest. And at the center of it all stood Joran and Sylvie, not as heroes on a pedestal, but as living proof that love could cross species, scars, and centuries of war. A year later, on the anniversary of their first meeting, the matriarch herself visited Outpost Theta 9, now renamed the Bastion of Shared Skies. She presided over the official recognition ceremony in a courtyard built where the old firing range once stood. Vines of earth ivy climbed the walls beside Varethian moonblossoms, their petals shimmering with bioluminescent dew, before thousands, human, Varethian, and others who'd come to witness. Sylvie and Joran exchanged vows in both languages, their rings forged from melted shrapnel of their first battle together. The matriarch placed her hand on both their foreheads and spoke the ancient blessing. "May your days be long, your silence rich, and your sky never divided." After the ceremony, as the twin sons of Varelis dipped below the horizon, painting the desert in gold and violet, Joran and Sylvie walked alone to the ridge overlooking the dunes. They no longer needed guards. The outpost was safe, not because it was armed, but because it was loved. "I used to think I was just a corporal assigned to a strange duty," Joran said, slipping his arm around her waist. "And I thought I would die alone, a general remembered only for how many I'd killed," Sylvie replied, leaning into him. Now they were known for how many they'd saved. Years passed. The bastion grew into a city, a true crossroads of species. Schools taught in 3 languages. Gardens bloomed with flora from a dozen worlds. And in a quiet home on the edge of town, nestled between a human greenhouse and a Varethian meditation grove, lived Joran and Sylvie. They never had biological children, but they adopted many, orphans of war, of accidents, of lost colonies. Their home echoed with laughter in every tongue, with bedtime stories that blended Earth myths and Varethian star sagas, with the pitter-patter of small feet and the soft hum of healing chants. On calm evenings, they still walked the ridge together, watching the stars. Sometimes they'd point out constellations, some named after battles, others after poets, and now a few after peacemakers. One night, as their eldest daughter, a human girl they'd rescued from a refugee transport, asked if the galaxy would ever know true peace, Sylvie smiled and said, "Peace isn't a place, little sky. It's a choice, made again and again." Joran squeezed her hand. "And as long as someone's willing to make it, we'll be okay." In the end, they didn't change the galaxy with weapons or treaties. They changed it by showing up, day after day, with kindness, courage, and an unwavering belief that even the deepest wounds could heal if tended with care. And in a universe once ruled by fear, that was the most revolutionary act of all. Their story became legend, not because it ended in glory, but because it never really ended at all. It lived on in every shared meal, every handshake across species, every child who grew up knowing that love had no color, no language, and no bounds. And high above the desert sands of Varelis, beneath the watchful eyes of twin moons, Joran and Sylvie grew old together, not as soldier and general, but as husband and wife, as parents, as pioneers of a gentler tomorrow. And that, in every sense that mattered, was a happy ending worth fighting for.